I am content strategist at Zengenti, which means that I help clients to plan and then produce and publish and maintain the content on their sites. And what I want to talk about today is the art of persuasion, and I want to focus on the words that we use on our websites, very particularly, and actually some of the very small words that we use on our websites, not necessarily great big long pages. We've got some more people coming in. Hello, come in, come in. And that concludes the session for today. I hope you found it. Hello, come in. So I want to talk about using words to persuade. And I think about, first of all, I just want to tell a story about the importance of the small things. So have we got any cycling fans? Yeah, great. So there's this story about Sir Dave Brailsford, and you know, maybe some of it's becoming a myth, but this guy became the head of British cycling in 2002. Before that, British cycling had won 1 gold medal in its 76-year history. At the 2008 Beijing Olympics, they took 7 out of 10 gold medals available in track cycling the same 4 years later. And now Sir Dave leads Britain's first ever pro cycling team, winning 3 out of 4 Tour de France events up to 2015. And so one of the questions is, how did he do it? How did he turn around the team, and how did everything that he touched seem to turn to gold? Small improvements in a number of different aspects of what we do can have a huge impact on the overall performance of the team. So I'm sure you've heard this, that he had this theory that if we can improve everything by 1%, like everything, then we'll have a huge competitive advantage over our opponents. Come in. Hi. So he looked for 1% improvements across the board. So there are things that you would expect, like the nutrition of the riders, the weekly training program that they were undergoing, the ergonomics of the bike seat, things like tyre weight, the intensity of the warm-down routine. So you think, yeah, that kind of makes sense. But then he was very, very geeky in getting into some of the other stuff, like he painted the team truck floor white. And the reason he did that was, against a white background, it's much easier to see dust. And so any small amount of dust in the maintenance zone in the truck getting into the oil, getting into the bikes, is going to slightly, ever so slightly, affect the performance of the bikes. He redesigned the team bus for comfort, and they researched the most effective massage gel. Riders took their own pillows to events, so they were more comfortable. Sleeping well. They taught all their riders and team how to wash their hands properly to minimize the chance of infection, because you don't want a key mechanic or rider being a bit under the weather on the day. And actually, they refused to shake hands with anyone. I remember that coming up in the Olympics just for the same reason. So it was that sort of attention to detail of looking for 1% improvements or more in all these different areas. And that's kind of the story that I want to tell today about the copy on your website. So this theory is called, well, this idea is the aggregation of marginal gains. If you can make small improvements across lots of areas, then overall you're going to have a competitive advantage. So some of the copy elements that we're going to think about, or some of the things you can apply what we talk about today to, are the headings, the subheadings, there's the body copy on the page, microcopy. If you haven't heard that term before, that normally refers to small instructional text added around a website just to help people know what to do. We've got links, we've got form fields, we've got, come in guys, find a seat. Got watermarks, so that's where you have a form field and it's already filled in with a hint. We've got error messages, we've got navigation labels, titles, so we're getting to some of the metadata now, titles, meta descriptions and tags, not just headings, but headlines, where you have more of a blog or a news item. You've got excerpts, where you pull a bit of the article out to feature on another page. You've got the text on buttons. You've got tooltips. Now, as a content strategist, I think these are the most important parts of the website. The content in the word form. But, you know, you can dispute that with me, that's fine. But what we are going to do is look at these today and see how those tiny things, improving them by 1%, could actually be more persuasive in helping people to complete the tasks that you want them to complete, and helping them to convert where you're trying to get them to do something, to make more effective self-service on your websites, and actually to create a stronger brand. So I'm not talking about persuasion as in rhetoric, of how you can convince people to do things. I'm actually thinking more about persuasion in terms of clarity. That if something is clear, people are far more likely to understand it and be able to act upon it. And I'm not thinking about spamming them either with kind of, you know, any way possible to get them to do something. Actually, if you make it easy, then they're more likely to complete on your site. So if we look at all these different bits of words, how we can improve them, I want to look at how we can make them clearer and how we can make them easier. Not how we can cajole people to do things they don't want to do anyway, but how we can make it very clear to the people who need to complete a task or get something done on your website, how they can do it and make it easy for them. I want us to think about cognitive fluency. Who's heard of cognitive fluency? A bit. The idea with cognitive fluency is psychological research has found that when people find something easy to accomplish, they're actually more likely to believe it. So there was some research into the US stock market where they found that companies with short, easy to pronounce names over time outperform those with longer or harder to pronounce names, because people trusted something that they could actually read a little bit more than they trusted others. And so the idea is that if people find something easy, it's as though they've done it before. It feels familiar. If it's easy, it's familiar. And so there was one psychologist who said, if it's familiar, it has not eaten you yet, thinking back to our caveman and cavewoman way of understanding the world. So familiarity, ease equals familiarity equals, for people, truth. So easy is actually true for people to some degree. So when we make things clear and we make them easy for people, then we're actually making it feel more true. And so that's the sort of persuasion that I think is really important on our websites. Conversely, disfluency functions as a cognitive alarm. It sets up a cognitive roadblock and makes people think, and it triggers a sense of risk and concern. So I'm not saying that people, the users of our website, should never have to think. Sometimes they just do, sorry about that. But actually, when things are harder to accomplish, you can see that there's an opposite effect. And this is part, I think, for us, if we make our copy clear and we make things easy to act upon, it is part of building up a trustworthy brand as well, which is so important. And I wanted to fit this in the presentation somewhere, even though it doesn't quite fit. But thinking about trustworthy brands, it made me laugh that I live in Somerset, and one of my local newspapers, the Somerset Gazette, I mentioned page titles earlier. So page title appears across the top of your browser or across the tab bar on your browser, as well as other places when you open a page. And they wanted to make sure they had their company name on there, so they put Somerset Gazette. And they thought that actually, whenever there's a story that gets shared around, it'd be nice to say it's from the Somerset Gazette. But they didn't really quite think it through, so I've just got a few examples here. Dad blasts Taunton taxi firm for refusing to pick up him and dead dog from Somerset County Gazette. Boy 12 of Taunton nearly dies from drinking vodka smuggled into school from Somerset County Gazette. Dog owners urged to be aware of deadly disease from Somerset County Gazette. And there were countless ones of these, really funny. And I quite like the last one because it's very country. Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue called to Boroughbridge to rescue lamb from Somerset County Gazette. Lamb stealing, child poisoning. Yes. I was a few search terms to try and find some of the headlines, because it's gleeful time looking, because it's on all their stories. But dogs was one of the search terms. Well spotted. Okay, so thinking about what we do with our copy, even the small things, makes a difference. So I've got 5 areas to think about. So the first one is being direct. One way to be direct is to use verbs, so to tell people what to do. This is an example from gov.uk. Part of one of their pages. Change, use, bind, move, change, start. Links to other articles which all start with verbs. Cancel, book, check. Moves people to act and to know what they get to do on that page straight away. And actually what you've got there, if you look at the nouns as well, you've got very concrete language in that it's verbs and nouns, and you strip out everything else that you don't really need. So it's find an earlier driving test, move your driving test, change the test centre, start now. So that's a good example of using verbs, and you can see where the verbs are placed on the page as well, at the start of the lines. Second thing you can do is actually be a bit bossy. Sometimes we can be tempted to scale things back a bit because we're English and we don't really want to tell people what to do too much. So, but actually online, clear, action-based verbs. So going back to that page, it's not rude to say start now. It's really helpful. You know how to get going. You know how to start. And I think sometimes a slightly bossier tone than we're used to writing works very well online. It made me think about a real-life example of if you've been to a big event where you're going to a car park and you have stewards to show you where to park. So you're driving through, you need to know where to go. You don't want to have to wind down the window with every steward and exchange a few pleasantries, or even read the sign that they're holding. They point, you drive. That's the job. And thinking about the way that we help people to navigate our pages, we point, they go there. That's how it works. So using verbs, being bossy, and then front-loading. So the concept of front-loading is exactly what I showed you with those verbs at the start. People scan web pages in a sort of F pattern. So they'll go across the top, so they're reading the headline or the heading, and then they'll scan down the side. So I'm doing this for you rather than me. So they start here, they go across. And then they scan down the side until they find a keyword that they're looking for, and then they might start to read across that line. No, it's not what I wanted, so then they go down again. There it is. And so heat mapping has shown, eye tracking, heat maps have shown that's exactly what people do. So your keywords should be at the start of your sentences, and they start at the top, so your keywords should be at the top of your pages as well. So that's why the gov.uk example was so good, because you could see they had the verbs, but they had them all at the start. The nouns follow pretty quickly afterwards. No one reads the whole web page. That's the truth. We scan to find the information that we want. And so talking about making it 1% easier, put the keywords to the top and to the start of your sentences. And I've just pulled out an example here of a meta description. So just ignoring the page title for a moment, if you search just for something like apply to university, which I did, I found on this page, find out everything you need to know about how to apply to study with us. If you have the motivation, ability, and potential to succeed at ... It's not just that the keywords aren't front-loaded, they're not particularly there. It doesn't actually mention the university itself. So apply to study was the thing I was looking for. So there we've got our verb and noun. But look where it is on the page. And you've got to remember how quickly people are going through results. I mean, when we scan Google results, we don't lovingly read every one. was looking for the key information very, very quickly. And it was worth contrasting that with another example, where again, if we take out the other metadata at the top, we've got a meta description, apply. So we've got the verb first, which is great for an undergraduate, postgraduate, part-time, short course at University of Derby directly through UCAS or from abroad, slightly box ticking. But you've got the key word at the start. I think I'd have liked to have seen the University of Derby at the front as well. We talk about front loading, apply to the University of Derby for, and then you could have the rest of the information. But the eye is going to see that straight away. I want to move on to the second thing to think about, which is getting personal. You talked about direct, now let's get personal. So what do I mean by that? I feel like you probably know this stuff, but it's a good reminder to address you. So when we think about the person that your website is written in, don't talk about your users in the third person, separate, applicants, things like that. Talk about you. There's really good advice if ever you've done any talking on the radio to think of one person that you're talking to and address everything to them. Because although you might be talking to millions, or I don't know, 100, people are listening individually. So when you listen to the radio, you want to hear the presenter talking to you. And so it's a similar thing online. Good example. Here, there are lots of good examples, but this is Bristol, government website. This is just all, you know, tell us if you see these things, rather than a sort of detached, you know, pothole reporting type thing, or just a list of traffic bollard, dead animal. Actually, they've taken the time to put some copy in there which says, you know, this is something you are going to do. Here's how to do it. And also tell us as well. Thinking about that, tell us, let us know. There was a time that everyone, you know, people would have put contact Bristol County Council or whatever it was, City Council. Actually, we can be a lot less formal on the internet. And I think it's much more persuasive to connect with people in that less formal way that's aimed at them. Some more examples there from the same website. It could just be called bus pass, couldn't it? It could just be bus pass usage, using bus passes, but they've actually decided to make sure it's right up there in the heading. And it's focused on the user. This one's a bit more subtle, but this is from a university website. And this made me think, because this is in a graduate's alumni area on the site. So deep down enough that I've gone there because I'm an alumnus. And it's got all these great resources, and these videos are really good. I really enjoyed watching them. But watch our graduation time lapse. Is that the right voice at this point? Because it's hard to say. It might not be my year, it might be a different year. But there's just a slight disconnect there of this is the university saying it's their graduation. Well, you're trying to create an area that is inclusive and gets your graduates to engage with the university even when they've left.
What is it saying? Is it our graduation or is it our time lapse?
Right. Yeah. In which case it's falling into that thing of, you know, what we do, you know, we're quite excited about the stuff we've done as opposed to making it about the user who would be really excited to see it. You know, they might spot themselves in it. So it was more of a subtle one, but just thinking about that issue of voice. So another way to make things personal is to make sure that we empathize with our users. I think we're a long way down the road of knowing that our content has to be user-centered and task-focused. The two important things. So we know that it should be about what the users are trying to do and help them to do it. But sometimes the way we deliver that isn't necessarily as empathetic to real people as it could be. Even when we've done our user research and we know the task they're trying to do, how much have we understood where people are at emotionally or what humans are actually like when sitting in front of a website. So this is a really obvious example, but a lot of forms ask that question when you're filling in the form. But are those the only two categories? What about intersex? Why is male first? It's not alphabetically first. What does that say? I'm not going to answer that question. I'm going to ask the questions. Yeah. And that's more of a biological thing, right? Actually, sex and gender. Sex tends to suggest there might be medical forms to fill in where actually that's a legitimate thing to be asking, but shouldn't we rather be talking about gender? I'm not going to answer any of these questions, but that's such a standard thing on a form. Do we ever take the time to think about the effect on people when they actually have to fill something like that in? And it's a fairly innocuous example. This is gov.uk's recommendation for handling that question. But fundamentally, I think a lot of the time that we ask for that, we probably don't need that information anyway. It's for our marketing that we want to do it. What about the user? What does the user think about having to fill in that information? So that's just one example of many. Totally different sort of example is this. There's something called the manipulink. Have you come across these? These are becoming more common. And definitely an example of non-empathetic behavior. The only way to get rid of this pop-up that's, you know, the rest of the screen has disappeared. This is all you've got. So you want to close it. If you don't want to see the deals, show me the deals, then no thanks. I don't like deals. So we're talking about being empathetic to users, being personal, helping them, and yet we're now putting words in their mouth. We're giving them a choice between two things, one of which is clearly the wrong choice, and we're going to make it that way, and we're going to have a laugh about it. Great. Well, how many of these do you have to click before you start to, you know, think dark things towards the organization who puts them there? I think it's negative user experience. Plus, the whole thing relegates more important information, like why don't we be honest about the promotional emails you're going to be spammed with if you do sign up? I think that's true. Okay, and thirdly, actually writing in users' language. So we're talking about addressing them as you, we're talking about understanding more of who they are as humans and emotional states when people are sat in front of the screen. We need to use their language as well. So back to Sheffield's site and their great videos. This is another subtle example, but again, if I'm an alumnus, this is clearly the labelling and categorisation of the university and not other alumni. I'm in this area, hopefully going to connect with some of the people I used to study with or find out if there are any events for, or, you know, etc. Oh, great, so there's a chance to go down memory lane on some of the stories, which is what this is, and it's called Sheffield Alumni Memories, like categorised according to content on our website. And then bear mascot, which is just slightly baffling. And doesn't it make you think, it certainly did for me, that if there's a story about a bear mascot, there's got to be something better you can write than Sheffield Alumni Memories about the thing. So this video, I watched it, and it does include many great quotes, such as, "The bear was strapped to the roof rack of the Mini and we drove back to Sheffield." Now, if that was on the front of the video, that is someone like me who used to go to university talking about something crazy that happened in their normal language, and I immediately relate to that more. So we're thinking not just about doing your research to find the language that the terms and the words that our users are familiar with and use, but actually the stuff they actually say. How can we bring that into the copy on our websites? Some good ideas there, and actually I think a good caution that don't get fluffy with making it personal. It doesn't mean that you've got license to, like, don't fill it out, because actually we started by saying clear and easy is persuasive. So So the third point is being concise. I'm going to talk very briefly about being short. Be short, you know. Error messages like that are not short. These are off the Windows Dev Center, where they recommend don't do that when you can do that. You know, and I could have picked any copy element to say you can probably make it shorter, or you should certainly be thinking about. The simple truth is that the longer you make it, the less people read it and the less people understand. Oh, let's add another thing to clarify it. And being precise as well, so some good examples of form copy here where your name as on card, because there are lots of different ways you can write your name. This is an example of a retail website where the recipient might be different to the person paying, so if you just wrote name, then that might not be clear. You can write recipient name. Oh, sorry. You know, how many times have we added something in and it doesn't like it, and maybe the error message isn't that clear, and it's just to do with whether you put spaces in or not. Do I include that bit on the end of the number or not? You know, actually, tiny, tiny things, right? But these are part of the 1% of the overall improvements that I think make it more persuasive and easier to use. So let's make things easy to understand. Reducing cognitive load is thinking back to that idea of cognitive fluency, where ease of accomplishment ends up equating how true something is for people, and cognitive load is the total amount of mental activity imposed on working memory in any one instant. And you think, well, people have loads of it, don't they? You know, no, because people aren't sitting in front of your website with the rest of the world shut out, purely focused on your wonderful copy. They're probably looking at it on a phone while trying to do something else at the same time, and they've had a hard day and they've got a million other things going on anyway. So the small amount of cognitive load that is available for your content, don't waste it. Lots of things can affect cognitive load, lots of small things. For example, one study found that unnecessary capital letters, so these are written in title case, can actually make content 13 to 18% harder to understand. So there's a really simple choice there. That's called title case. It's one version of title case where you capitalize all the important words in a sentence, versus sentence case where you capitalize the first one. And then you would only capitalize names, you know, proper nouns after that. Easier to understand. Small thing reduces cognitive load. So I was going to get you to take this one apart, but we'll just skip through it. But there's quite a lot of things there that actually add to the cognitive load when trying to understand that page, trying to see what's going on. Not least the capitalization we've talked about. We talked about front loading earlier there. If you scan down that thing, you're just looking at a bunch of big numbers. You've got a repetition of free courses, free business courses, free courses down there. Just trying to understand and get your head around that. You'll get there. It's not that hard. But there's a certain amount of friction to get to the point of understanding. And we could make things easy for people and therefore make them more persuasive. So we need to remove the extra work. This was a good example of a drop-down. What phone were you looking for? Because we've put them in a completely random order. So you have to read and understand every single one to make sure you're not missing the one that you actually want. And it's little things like that. Actually, you shouldn't make people have to read every single word on the page. Very easy to scan and find the thing that they're looking for. This is a way of helping people as well, which I really like. Before you start filling this out, here's what you need. And here's some key information. And it's deliberately designed that way so that people who know what they're doing are confident or just hit start now and go through it. They don't have to waste time on this. But there's just that before you start, little check, actually save yourself the hassle of getting halfway through and not knowing what your blue badge number is. Yep. Right, yeah. 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 Yeah, there's a tricky question there of where to place it. Yeah. I think on gov.uk they started off above the button, this section, but then they decided that it was taking up too much room and pushing the button down. So there's hey, that could be solved with design, right? We'll get the words right. Okay. Keep it simple. I haven't got time to really go into this, but this is entrance requirements, Cambridge University. One of the myths about readability is if you're dealing with potential applicants to a university like Cambridge, they're very literate, so why does it need to be really readable? Because those applicants to Cambridge University, like everybody else on the planet, don't want to waste time reading a web page. It's harder for them than it needs to be. So simplicity, the reading age of the copy on that page was at 21, which means, no, it was 25, which way around was it? I've got it in my notes. Yeah, it was 21. So that means roughly 21 years of education required to understand it. And it comes down to, most readability scores come down to sentence length and word length. And so there's a very easy way to make shorter sentences, use shorter words where they're available, where there's an alternative. And you can increase the readability. Some tools there. That's another great example of how they've mangled the search, so not all the courses are here. So you have to do something special with the search over there, but you read the instructions first. I don't know how you can make a search more complicated than that. Okay, so this is my final point. I know time is up. So explaining why. Give a reason to people to do things. So, yeah, okay, there's more information. But actually, oh, right, yeah, so I can work out if the university's right for me. So there's a reason to go to the open day. And explaining the benefit. So don't say things like, read our latest blog post. Yeah, because I got up this morning thinking, blog posts, that's what I'd like to read. Just any. Also, our latest blog post. Woo, woo, latest. Actually, if you've got a blog post called that, that's quite interesting. Use the title of your blog post. If the heading of your blog post doesn't grab people and make them want to read it, you might want to write about something different or write better headlines. And you can give reason and explain benefits through simple ways. They're all quite functional, mechanical about what's going to happen next. That actually suggests something you're going to get. The free trial comes when you click this button. You get started. I know it's only subtle, but actually something's happening. Rather than download, maybe read now, but there are discussions to be had about that. That's a bad example. Okay, so that's the art of persuasion. Sorry to rush through the last bit there, but being direct, getting personal, being concise, making things easy to understand, and explaining why. Thanks for joining in as well.